Hey everyone, welcome back to the reading of Smoldering Hunger. Today we'll be discussing chapter 14. To recap, there have been 3 sex scenes, 2 break-ins, 1 conversation, and a lot of bad guys. That is literally the recap of the first 100 pages. We've got 200 pages to go. Hang in there, we're gonna make it. We will be reading chapter 14. Before we dive into the chapter, I mentioned in my last video that I'm doing this because I want to start conversations. I want to talk to people in my life about relationships, consent, our expectations of one another. And I have to say that I'm hoping you're able to utilize this as a platform to discuss these things with the people in your lives as well. And it doesn't have to be a serious conversation with, say, a significant other. These could be conversations with your friends. I was talking to 2 of my friends, guy friends, and, we were talking about consent. And one of the things was kissing. And this conversation actually became bigger because I was in Charlotte, North Carolina this weekend visiting one of my really good friends. He took me to a brewery, and we happened to be sitting next to these 2 beautiful and amazing women who were all on a date. And we ended up pulling them into a conversation with us because we were talking about kissing, we were talking about different types of kissing, the things we like, what we don't like, and we ended up discussing kissing and consent. Now, this was the consensus that all of us reached. So for me personally, I like to give verbal consent. I'm very, very big on verbal consent, but that's me. That's just who I am as a person. If I want to kiss you, I will say, I want to kiss you. Now, that doesn't mean you have to kiss me. That doesn't mean, anything has to come of it. It's just, I'm putting it out there. This is what I want. If you would like to reciprocate, by all means, do so. Well, when I was talking to these wonderful women and I was talking to my friend, it also came down to sometimes you don't need to give verbal consent. Sometimes, just by being around someone through body language, through, like how you look at someone, how the night is going, you don't really need to say, I want you to kiss me. You can just kiss someone. And, I agree with them. When you're out on a date with somebody and things are going really well and you're having a great time, you're going to be giving off some sort of cues. You're going to be kind of putting it out there like, hey, kiss me. You may occasionally meet a woman like me, excuse me, who'll just turn around and say, kiss me, or may I kiss you? Which I have done, and the gentleman in question responded in a very sexy way, I may add. But that's a different story. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is we were able to have this conversation, and not only, we didn't just talk about that, we talked about behaviors in general. We talked about how men and women behave with each other. Something as simple as having a man open a door for you. Now, I'm usually walking ahead of somebody, so I usually end up opening the door. Now, if someone is reaching around me to open the door for me, I will wait for them to do so. But to me, opening a door was never, an act of chivalry. It was just, a door needs to be opened. I've been in situations where people have gotten upset with me that I'm not allowing them to open the door. And it never crossed my mind that that would be something someone would be upset with. And what was fascinating is when I was discussing this with these 2 women, that's kind of the consensus we came to. But the perspective given to us by our male friend was, well, this has been ingrained into men's head, that this is the behavior that is expected of them. My response to that was, well, we have to break through our expected behavior. They should do the same. But, I don't know. I may not be correct in this. If you have a differing opinion, please, by all means, let me know. I would love to talk to you about this. But again, it's opening the door for conversation. All right, so let's move into chapter 14. Maybe it would be interesting. So let's see what happens. Sophie woke to the most exquisite pleasure. Darius' fingers were between her legs, stroking her. She opened her eyes to find him watching her. His dark eyes burned with desire that made chills race over her skin. Could he really want her that much? It seemed impossible, and yet the thought of it made her own passion blaze hotter. She lifted her face to his and pressed her lips against his mouth. He moaned as he kissed her with such abandon that it left her breathless. As his fingers filled her, his thumbs circled her clit in an agonizing slowness. slowness, almost as if he knew she was ready to peek but was drawing things out. She gripped his arm, silently begging him to give her more. It didn't budge him. Sophie gasped at the pleasure and tore her mouth from his as it overwhelmed her. Her lungs couldn't draw enough breath, but none of that mattered as the desire coiled tighter and tighter within her. "I need you inside of me," she begged him. He smiled. "Oh, I will be." She tried to stop him, but it felt too good. He held her gaze, refusing to release her as his experienced hands brought her to the brink of climax, holding her there for a few seconds and then gently pushing her over the edge. Sophie opened her mouth to scream, but it was locked in her throat from the sheer force of the orgasm. It rocked through her, seizing her body as if it washed over her, as powerful as a waterfall, as fiercely as the sun. When she was able to draw breath into her lungs again, he was kissing her. It was slow, sexy, sensual, and it totally rocked her world. That's a terrible way to end that. The Silver Dragon, Perth. Ulrich sliced off a sliver of the apple with his knife and brought it to his mouth. He chewed it as he glanced at the open folder on his desk. What's up with apples? I know, I'm only saying this because in another book, they were also eating apples. He walked around the shop, but he wasn't looking at the antiquities he'd purchased through the years. No, he was thinking of Sophie Martin. Dr. Sophie Martin. He wanted to know her story from the moment he learned she helped Thorn. It took only one call to discover all the details. Ulrich expected to find something he could use to blackmail her into doing what he wanted, as it was with anyone he dug into, but Sophie was different. She was a loner, mistrustful, and wary of any man, and knowing what her fiancé had done to her, he understood it. Her past also explained why she left London, though there was no reason as to why she chose Edinburgh, other than one of her old professors from Oxford practiced medicine in Edinburgh, at the Royal Victoria Hospital. Sophie had no family in Scotland. She had no family anywhere. Easier to get rid of people that way. Knowing all of this before he met her, Ulrich went to his first meeting with Sophie intending to be just the right amount of charming without making her suspicious. He was going to play on her sympathies of helping the less fortunate, yet she turned it back on him and brought his past into the conversation. For a woman who didn't date and rarely paid attention to the opposite sex, Ulrich had expected a certain reaction from her. He hadn't gotten it. What does that mean? That doesn't make you any less perceptive. It meant he was going to have to change tactics. Ulrich cut off another slice of the apple and paused to study the file. There was a connection between the beautiful doctor and Darius. Ulrich just needed to find it. With the other kings, they hadn't been able to stay away from the mortals, but so far Darius was also doing the opposite of what Ulrich expected. Ulrich, God, this man's name. Ulrich thought back to seeing Darius and Sophie having sex. It had been so wild and rough that it was born of a clawing hunger between them that wouldn't be denied. They had to have each other to experience pleasure. I don't know. I mean, can you really tell that about people having sex? Not that I've watched anybody having sex. Not my no, but the way Darius had kissed her, though, Ulrich was going to have to keep a closer eye on Sophie. If you knew anything about Darius, it was that he took his responsibilities seriously. Even if Sophie was nothing more than a quick shag, Darius wouldn't leave Edinburgh without ensuring that Ulrich left Sophie alone. Ulrich smiled and wondered what Darius would think if he knew Ulrich had coffee with the lovely Sophie. It made Ulrich chuckle just thinking about it. It was so easy to rile the other kings, just threaten a mortal and they lost their minds. How pathetic did they have to be? He continued his walk around the shop, his mind returning to Sophie once more. Ulrich wanted her working for him. She could be a great asset, even more so if he could get her to spy for him. Darius trusted her. The trick was convincing Sophie it was the right thing to do. She kept to herself. There was only one friend he could threaten, but he suspected that move would only alienate her altogether. No, he couldn't threaten the short blonde. If Ulrich was going to get Darius through Sophie, then he would have to change tactics. He'd try once more to pull Sophie into his side. If that didn't work, then he had something that might just do the trick. Most humans were easy to decipher, but Sophie was different. She didn't date, didn't hang with friends, or have any kind of social life. All that mattered was her healing people. Ulrich sliced off another piece of apple and ate it. Even though his men hadn't seen Darius at Sophie's flat, that meant nothing. The kings were nothing if not predictable. Now that Ulrich had shown up at the hospital, Darius would keep an eye on Sophie. How long would it take before Darius had to tell Sophie about the Dragon Kings, the Fae, and even Ulrich? If Sophie was nothing more than a single shag, Ulrich might be doing all of this for nothing, but he had a feeling it wasn't the case. Darius was too predictable. So was Khan. Darius would tell Khan about their chat, and Khan would demand that Darius remain around to see what Sophie learned and how what move Ulrich made next, which meant Darius wouldn't be able to keep his hands off Sophie. Ulrich laughed as he threw his knife, embedding it in the center of the picture of Khan. My move. So why are we even reading this entire story? This man just basically summarized the freaking plot for us. Darius couldn't believe how quickly the night passed. He hadn't brought up Ulrich with Sophie. How could he when he couldn't keep his hands off her? Being near her was impossible without touching her. He lost count of the many times they had made love. Each time he saw the pleasure cross her face, he wanted to see it again and again and again. While he pretended to sleep, Sophie quietly made coffee in the kitchen. He cracked open an eye and watched her through the doorway, wearing nothing more than an ivory robe and her long red hair falling down her back. It made him smile every time he thought of her sleeping naked. She surprised him with things like that. With the way she wore her hair always up and every strand in place, he figured she would wear flannel to bed. I don't know how I feel about that observation. That doesn't mean anything. Darius rolled over and watched her as she sifted through the mail. It was so mundane, yet it fascinated him. Then again, everything about Sophie captivated him. He rose from the bed and put his jeans on, not bothering to button them as he walked from the bedroom. Her head lifted and she smiled. There was a part of Darius that realized that simple action was dangerous for him. But still he walked to her, still allowed himself to become entangled in something that could easily rip him apart, this time for good. "Good morning," she said. He grinned. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "With the little sleep I got, yes." Her smile widened as her eyes twinkled. "Not that I'm complaining. And you?" "Yes." Though he rarely slept. As a dragon king, he didn't need to, not even in human form. Not to mention he had been in deep dragon sleep for several centuries. I wonder what the physiology of dragon shapeshifters is. She dropped the envelopes and turned back to the counter. "Coffee?" "Sure, 3 teaspoons of sugar, please." She glanced at him over her shoulder, the surprise evident on her face. 3? "I like things sweet," he said with a shrug. She laughed but added the sugar to his coffee before handing it to him. "That's 2 surprises this morning." 2? What was the first? You still being here. He waited until after she poured her coffee before he said, "I wasn't supposed to return to you at all." "Why did you?" she asked as she leaned back against the counter, her coffee mug held between her hands. "You know why. Because we're good in bed together?" she asked before taking a sip of the steaming liquid. Darius set his mug on the table and studied her. "Does that bother you, lass?" "Definitely not. It's been a long time since I've had sex." "How long?" She glanced at the floor. "Too long. But that brings me to something I can't believe as a doctor I didn't think about. Protection." Conversations you need to have with someone you're sleeping with before you sleep with them. Let's see how this conversation goes. $10 because he's a dragon king, he can't get people pregnant. Protection? Darius was confused. Was she asking him to protect her from Ulrich? "Yes, I don't want to get pregnant." Darius could only stare at her as she spoke so matter-of-factly. Why wouldn't she be matter-of-fact? Oh, God, what? Come on, guys. Really? It must have to do with the fact that she was a doctor and used to discussing such things. "No, sweetheart. I don't know who you've been sleeping with, but in this day and age, this shit gets discussed immediately. Nobody wants a kid that nobody wants." He was battered by the memory of holding his son in his arms. Pregnant, it could happen, as well as he knew. He clenched his teeth together and waited for the worst of the pain to pass so he could breathe easier. Darius swallowed and shook away the memory that had pushed him into his mountain. "You needn't worry about any diseases. As for you getting pregnant..." "Buddy, how do you know? I don't know you. You need to go get yourself checked." This is pissing me off. He couldn't even finish the sentence. Darius wanted to tell her it couldn't happen. He wished with all his might that that were the truth. The idea that she may very well be carrying his child made him begin to shake. He couldn't go through that again. He refused. Okay, so clearly he's been through some trauma. He's lost his child. He's probably lost his mate. Are you serious? Wouldn't you discuss this? Wouldn't you take precautions if you were that traumatized? These people do not know how to process trauma. "Darius, are you all right?" He blinked and looked down to find Sophie next to him, her hand on his shoulder as she gazed at him with concern in her olive eyes. "All right?" He'd never be all right again. He lied. You didn't look all right a moment ago. Darius waved away her words. You didn't upset me. Good. She dropped her hand from his arm and picked up her coffee that was beside him on the table. I'm not good with social necessities. Or niceties. I'm sorry. Darius, I'm sure I'm going to offend you with my bluntness. It's just how I am. Life is too short for deceptions and lies. That's not you being blunt, sweetheart. That's you being straightforward and having a conversation you should have had with him in the beginning. Deceptions and lies. Yes, he agreed. Yet he lived his entire existence from the moment of the war with the humans in shams and deceits. It was the only way he and the other kings survived without another war. It would have been so easy to take out the mortals. Nothing they had then or now could kill a dragon king. They could have wiped the realm of any existence of humans, but they hadn't, all because of a vow. Yes. How benevolent of you. The oath put them in a position where they had to hide who they were and make deception a way of life. Sophie would never understand that. Most humans wouldn't. If they only knew about the Dragon Kings, what they had sacrificed for their existence. You drifted off again, Sophie said. Darius raked a hand through his hair. I apologize. I've a lot on my mind. The danger you spoke about the other night? Yay. Aye. Darius took the opportunity that presented itself and said, There's a man who would hurt you just from being associated with me. He's a murderer, Sophie. He was at the hospital the other day. I followed him there. You saw both of us. Her head slowly nodded. The man in the sweater. She nodded her head. Yes, Darius grabbed her shoulders and looked into her eyes. He may try to approach you. He'll seem innocent enough, but he's extremely cunning, and he came by the hospital to see me yesterday, she interrupted him. Darius felt as if he'd been skewered with dark magic, and to think he'd almost left Edinburgh and Sophie behind. Tell me everything. Well, there we have it, chapter 14. I'm just going to leave it at that. We'll try to get to chapter 15 to hear him blow up. But please have conversations with your significant others. Please have conversations with your new partners. It's always good to be protected. You know, it's a good idea. Well, I will see you later. We will be back with the dramas of Sophie and Darius. Bye.